A stronger day, be your best every day. Hi, I'm Demas, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. I aim to help you stay healthy, be happier, and deal with challenges with greater resilience. Do you know that the quality of your motivation is more sustainable than the quantity of your motivation? What is intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? And how can you initiate a sustained motivation to achieve your goals? Today, you'll meet Dr. Gavin Slemp. Gavin will show you how you can apply the three key elements of self-determination theory to sustain your motivations, enhance your well-being, and accomplish your goals. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Demas and I'm the founder and director of Strength Optimizer. Thank you for watching Strength Optimizer, the Science Up Your Wellbeing series. Today we have Dr. Gavin Slemp, who is the senior lecturer at the Center of Positive Psychology of Melbourne University. Gavin's expertise is in the areas of wellbeing science, job crafting, performance, motivations, and the self-determination theory, which is the focus of our interview today. Thank you for joining us, Gavin. And how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Good to be with you.
That's good, that's good. So, Gavin, how would you describe yourself as a well-being consultant, researcher, as well as a teacher?
Yeah, so I guess my role is as an academic, and then as part of that role, primarily a teacher and a researcher. And so I do most of my role focuses on teaching and research. And then also we try and practice in addition to that. So practice in the areas of well-being, through consulting and that type of thing. And so my specialization is in, work motivation, job crafting, leadership. And so far as we try and foster or look at how leaders try and or can sort of facilitate environments that allow for higher levels of job crafting and better types of motivation and in turn well-being and so on. So those are primarily the ways the things I look at. And so in the readership in the research front, my interests align with those sorts of areas. So job crafting, leadership, motivation, and well-being.
Yeah. And I think that is so important right now, I guess, that for a lot of leaders who are suddenly being thrown into this whole era of uncertainty, of chaoticness, and therefore having some sort of frameworks or principles to help them to navigate through this really uncertain time, or the buzzword a lot of people using, the unprecedented crisis, so to speak. It's so important, and I'm glad that you're doing a lot of research and consultancy in this area. And unfortunately, I wish we have more time, to talk about the various topics, maybe next time. But for today's interview, I know that well-being is a buzzword right now, especially during the COVID pandemic. And there are many definitions, theories, understandings, and even practices when it comes to well-being. So, Gavin, what is well-being and why it matters?
It's a really good question, and it's a notoriously difficult one to answer.
Yes.
And it depends a lot on who you ask, I think. So, if you were to ask someone who's trained in probably areas of clinical psychology, well-being is a lot about, the absence of psychological disorder and, distress and these types of things. And so if you ask someone who's more in the area of sort of well-being science or positive psychology, perhaps, you'll get a different answer. But then even then you get a lot of debate about what well-being is. And so I guess the one thing that everyone seems to agree on is that well-being is what's referred to as a construct. And then as a construct, it has multiple parts to it. And so you're probably wondering what those parts are.
Yes.
And so I guess the most accepted view of well-being is that it comes from philosophy. And so, it goes back to the work of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with what's referred to as the hedonic component of well-being, which is more the feeling part of well-being.
Mm.
And that, well-being is mainly about the attainment of pleasure or things that feel good, and the relative absence of pain. And so it has, in that perspective, it's more about, balancing pleasure and pain, and we want more pleasure than pain, obviously, because pleasure feels good.
Yes, absolutely.
I guess the limitation of that view is that, it doesn't take into account that some things that are unpleasant to experience can help us, have better mental health in the long run, potentially because they help us grow, or they give us a sense of meaning and that sort of thing, or perhaps they help us learn, or, it might be a catalyst for change, or these types of things. And so that's where the other area of well-being comes in, which is more the eudaimonic component, or what's referred to as the eudaimonic component of well-being, or eudaimonia. And, that comes from the work of Aristotle. And so if the hedonic part of well-being is more about sort of feeling or feeling good, then this part is more about, functioning. And so, the way I sort of describe this when I teach about well-being is, if you think about mountaineers, mountaineers who sort of go and climb the world's highest mountains like Everest or K2, or, these extremely dangerous places in the world, where the oxygen is very thin and you can only survive for a limited number of time. If you read the biographies of those mountaineers, just to try and get a sense of why they would do that sort of thing.
A crazy thing.
That's right. Well, why would they do it? Well, a lot of the time, if you read their biographies, it's not just about pleasure seeking. Some aspects might be pleasurable, but, in fact, a lot of the time it's their stories are full of misery as well. They'll have friends who die, perhaps due to, oxygen and complications that go on in mountaineering, frostbite, losing limbs, all these sorts of things that go on. But they do it perhaps because it gives them a sense of purpose, or a sense of meaning, or a sense of, a goal to pursue for the future, an ambition perhaps. And so through that, it gives their life, this sense of, it makes them feel a part of something bigger perhaps. And so that's more about the eudaimonic component of well-being. So it's not just about feeling or feeling good, or, pleasure over pain. It's also about this functioning element as well, which is really captured in that, the eudaimonia. And so a lot of people in the area of well-being science and positive psychology generally say that you have to balance both, or you have to have both components of well-being.
Yeah, very well said. Very succinct explanation. Thank you. And I think that what you mentioned about both the hedonic and eudaimonics, they are not mutually exclusive. They're not against each other. It's just a matter of what's the level of proportion that we have both. And when you're talking about the experience of mountaineer, suddenly I just come up with these three words that start with P. In terms of well-being, one is about pleasure, and then the other is about pain, and the other part is about purpose as well. Especially right now, I guess I don't have all the hard data or statistics to say that how many people are actually in quest or in search of meaning and purpose, especially right now during the pandemics, where certainly a lot of, I guess, that the things that we think that are secure and stable and consistent suddenly has been scattered away, whether it's in terms of jobs, whether it's in terms of finance, whether in terms of health. And that certainly has put a lot of people doing this whole process of what is happening, what is normal again, what is the point, and what lies ahead. And therefore, part of the, I guess, that the pursuit of well-being is to be able to see again what sort of meaning or purpose they're able to see, even in some really senseless or unexplainable helpless situations. Would it be correct to say so?
I mean, I think the meaning and purpose component of well-being is essential, particularly in times like the ones we find ourselves in. I think it's, very turbulent times, a lot of uncertainty, as you say, but finding ways that we can have that sense of meaning and purpose in our lives is essential, and it'll help us sort of, get through these times. It does tend to help a lot of people get through them. And so, you know, we talked about mountaineers and that sort of thing, and that's sort of one way perhaps that people, you know, can inject a bit of meaning or purpose or, you know, mastery perhaps into their lives. But, you know, a lot of people get it through connecting with other people, or perhaps connecting, you know, with their church, or, you know, connecting, you know, learning, you know, going to university, that type of thing. So a lot of different ways to achieve, you know, that sense of meaning and purpose in life. But yes, it is something that's quite important.
Yeah, excellent. I feel that we can spend the next hour or so just to talk about the meaning of purpose in life and the well-being, but I need to bring myself back into today's, the aim of today's interview. But thank you so much for your sharing and explanation. I know that one of the very well-researched and established theories of well-being flourishing is the self-determination theory developed by Dr. Ryan Deci. So in a nutshell, I'm going to put you on the hot seat again. What is self-determination theory, and how is it related to well-being?
Yes, it's a very good question. Again, a very big question, but I'll do my best to answer it. So self-determination theory is a theory of motivation, going back to the 1970s, you know, work on started on this area with Ed Deci. And then sort of grew from there. Now it's sort of evolved into what's called a meta theory, or which is basically a theory of theories. And so there are 6 sort of smaller mini theories that come into self-determination theory. And I guess the 2 most well-known are the ones that describe, one of them describes a sort of continuum of motivation, and the other one is about basic psychological needs that we have. And so perhaps I'll unpack what those 2 things are. Yeah. And so if you think about a lot of, you know, self-determination theory is not the only theory of motivation. There's actually quite a lot of different theories of motivation. But self-determination theory is unique in that it, how it sort of talks about motivation. And so what it tends to do is focus on the quality of motivation rather than just the quantity, or how motivated are you. And so if you imagine sort of a runner, you know, running past your window, going for a jog outside, you know, the typical motivation-based theory would be asking the question such as, how motivated is that person to run? Or how can we make them more motivated to run, or to run faster or more often, or whatever it is. Self-determination theory would ask, you know, why is she running? And, you know, can we help her perhaps run for better reasons that are going to be more sustainable and keep her involved in the activity and that type of thing? And can we help her enjoy it more? And those are the types of questions that self-determination theory sort of unpacks. And so it sort of falls onto a continuum of motivation. And so it sees sort of some types of motivation as very high in quality. And those are the very internal types of motivation. Intrinsic types of motivation are, you know, are considered the highest quality form of motivation. And that's basically where we're motivated to do an activity purely out of interest or enjoyment or love for the activity itself. And so the activity is something that we just love to do, and we just want to keep doing it because it's fun, it's enjoyable, and so on. And so the other types of motivation are more extrinsic, or what they refer to as controlled types of motivation. And this is where the motivation starts to shift away from an internal source into something that's more external. And so perhaps we're motivated through some sort of external, you know, to trying to avoid some sort of external punishment that we might receive, or you know, to seek some type of reward that's external. You know, money or something like that is a purely external motivator. And so that's an example. It's seen as a controlled type of motivation because it's purely external to the self. And so if you take away that external motivator, the motivation tends to disappear. So it's seen as a less high quality form of motivation, in that it's less sustainable. And also it's less correlated with mental health. You know, more controlled types of motivation tend to be more associated with, you know, factors like burnout and so on. And that's because when we're engaging in something that we're not autonomously motivated to do, or we're not intrinsically motivated to do, perhaps, you know, it becomes a bit of a slog, a bit of a grind, and we just don't enjoy it as much. And so it does tend to, you know, lead to burnout a bit more easily. And so that's a bit about the continuum of motivation. And that's one of the big contributions of self-determination theory. And that's one of their little mini theories that they have within the broader field of self-determination theory. The other one is, you know, what's referred to as basic psychological needs theory. And self-determination theory suggests that humans, you know, just like all humans have physical needs, you know, to eat and you know, and so on, to drink water, you know, and that type of thing. We all have basic psychological needs as well. And so it really has put forward 3 basic psychological needs, and it suggests that we need these needs satisfied in order to flourish. And the needs are to feel autonomous, to feel related to other people, and to feel competent or capable of doing what we seek out to do. And so autonomy, you know, that need to feel autonomy it's not about independence or being independent from other people, but it's more just about volition, in that when we're working on something or when we're pursuing an activity, we're choosing to do it for ourselves. And that's essentially what it's getting at. And then the related to other people, you know, having that sense of belonging, that sense of connection to other people. We feel cared for and we care for other people in return. And then that sense of competence, or that need for competence, is more about just having that feeling of self-efficacy. We're capable of doing what we need to do. We have the opportunities to grow and develop and become stronger, perhaps, at what we're doing. And those are the 3 needs, basically. And, you know, SDT, which is self-determination theory for short, you know, SDT suggests that when we have those 3 needs satisfied, then it's going to lead to sort of flourishing and more intrinsic internal types of motivation as well.
Wow, Gavin. I'm always impressed with your ability to explain and unpack a highly complicated theory or construct it into something that's very bite-sized and palatable and easy to understand. I'm not quite sure how I'll be able to summarize what you just shared with us, but in a nutshell, so, you know, when you talk about part of self-determination theory, it is a series of motivations, and under that, and the meta is big. There are 6 mini theories, and there are 2 theories that is more related to well-being and motivations. The fact that you talk about both extrinsic and intrinsic, I guess that the way I'm going to see it is that one extrinsic is something along the line that I have to do something.
Yeah.
And for example, I have to go to gym. You know, I have to take up the garbage.
Yes.
I have to run the errands, versus to I want to go to gym or exercise, or maybe even I like to go to gym, or I love to. So I guess that we all have experienced these 2 types of motivations, depending to the nature of tasks and activities and circumstances as well. But based on what you're saying, and from a research point of view, is the quality of the motivations that is the difference, rather than quantity. Once again, it's not about how much, how motivated you are. It's essentially what drives you to do what you do. Is it something that gives you a purpose, something that gives you a pleasure, something that gives you a sense of competency at you? So again, we'll explain that according to the basic psychological need theories, there are 3 main components or main psychological needs. If they're all met, then there's, according to this theory, SCT, there's a science indicators of well-being and flourishing.
That's right. Yeah. So those are the 2 essential contributions of self-determination theory, and there's others as well. But you know, I don't think we've probably got time to go into those. But I think definitely, as you described, you know, I have to, as opposed to I want to. You know, that's the distinction that's getting at the intrinsic, or, you know, autonomous or controlled types of motivation. You know, when we want to do something, it's volitional. That's a very autonomous activity. It's autonomously motivated, and we're doing it purely because we want to do it. You know, perhaps we enjoy it, or we just see value in it, or whatever it might be. And then the I have to type activities. Yes, that's what's considered a controlled type of motivation. So we have that sense of obligation to engage in the activity. And, sometimes that obligation is self-imposed as well. It can be an internal pressure that we place on ourselves. So we might feel a sense of guilt or a sense of shame because we don't do something. And that sort of compels us into that activity as well. Yeah. And so, yes, a less high quality form of motivation, less correlated with mental health. It's not to say that it's always harmful though. Controlled motivation is still a type of motivation, and it still gets us perhaps doing activities that we need to do to function, perhaps going to gym. One of the stories I tell, I think, when I teach about motivation is that, and it's another important point, I think, is that I try and capture when I teach about motivation, is that motivation is not static. It tends to shift and change for the activity, even for the same activity a lot of the time. And so, I talk about why I got into running. So I like to go running. I do jogging and that type of thing. Gets me outside into fresh air, and I feel fit and good when I do it.
Yeah.
But my motivation didn't really start that way. And so, back, 15 years ago, when I wasn't really doing much sort of exercise, I would see my friends going to gym. I would see my friends exercising, and then I would sort of feel this sense of guilt that I wasn't really doing anything. And so that sort of motivated me to get outside and actually start doing something. So I chose running. Yeah, that's right. And, but that's a controlled form of motivation. I felt like I had to do it, or it was that internal pressure that I placed on myself. And so I got out there, and it wasn't that fun at the start because I wasn't very fit, and it was quite painful. But I pushed through it, and then after a while, I started to find areas that I enjoyed about running. So, for example, I started to enjoy that sensation that I could feel I was becoming fitter, and I could sustain a period of running for longer. Perhaps, I would start to see the nice parts of the day. If you go out for a run, either at dawn or dusk, you might see a nice sunset or sunrise. And, you would find enjoyment in those sorts of things as well. So, and that's what's referred to as internalization. And that's where motivation can start out as something that's quite controlled, but you find ways to enjoy it and internalize that motivation over time. And it can become, so controlled motivation can become more autonomous and intrinsic over time. Might not happen, but it can happen. Yeah. And so controlled motivation is not always bad.
And that's the good news, I guess, that because sometimes people may wonder, how can I turn something that I have to do to something that is pleasurable, that I look forward to doing? But based on, again, what you said, it's okay to start with the extrinsic, like external motivations, something that is, I guess, a little bit more tangible that we can see. But throughout the whole process, if there are ways for us to transform and transfer the extrinsic into intrinsic, then again, the quality of the motivation is going to be increased. And therefore, whatever that we're doing is going to serve a better values and purpose, and of course, more sustainable as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, I guess it becomes a problem if all of our motivation for most of the activities that we do is sort of controlled and external. Then it'll lead to burnout and then that type of thing. But, I think it's necessary to have some activities, perhaps sometimes that we are, it is more of a controlled motivation that will help us get through, that activity that we need to do. But I think having a balance is important. We're not going to be intrinsically motivated for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And so, but, there might be ways we can try and find more intrinsic motivation in what we're doing. And so that's important as well.
Yeah. And that can be the next part of our interview. Another topic talking about it. All right. I guess the next question for you is that with the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of people are experiencing either redundancy and unemployment. So, how can one use self-determination theory to navigate through redundancy, unemployment, and at the same time to maintain our well-being as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's probably new terrain for even self-determination theory as well. But if we go back just to the basics of self-determination theory and look at the things that we know are sort of good for us, and that is, more intrinsic, autonomous types of motivation, and then activities that help us to satisfy our basic needs. as well. So activities that help us feel autonomous, they help us feel competent, and then related to other people and connected to other people. And so finding activities that help us engage in those types of experiences are going to be quite helpful, I think, in the harmful or the challenging times that a lot of people are going through at the moment. And employment is a difficult one. Employment itself is quite central to mental health. There's lots of longitudinal studies now with huge data sets that look at the relationship between employment and well-being. And a very consistent finding is that, employment is related to well-being. And potentially a lot of that comes through basic needs and having those sort of needs satisfied as well. And having that sense of purpose and meaning. A lot of people get a sense of purpose and meaning through their work. And so I guess the first thing would be to if it's possible, trying to find a different job. That's not going to be possible for everyone. It's a very difficult time at the moment. And so if that's not an option, then finding activities that will help us get that sense of meaning and purpose in the absence of employment. And then also finding activities that help us satisfy our basic needs, for autonomy, competence, and relatedness in the absence of having a stable job there as well. And so, for example, if we find ourselves out of work at the moment, perhaps it's a redundancy or something like that, then is there something that you could do perhaps to build your competence in your area of expertise? Perhaps it's about learning something new or a new skill related to your work, growing in a particular area, or something like that. So for me, perhaps it would be, learning about perhaps, new and improved ways to deliver online sort of learning, as an example, or perhaps, different statistical tools I could use in research or something like that. So something like that has the mutual benefit of, helping us satisfy our need for competence, and that we can, sort of grow and develop and have that sense of mastery, as people. But potentially something like that could also make us more attractive to future employers as well. We have a more developed sort of skill set as well. And so that's something that, self-determination theory, I think, would probably propose. And then also, a lot of people have their social networks, and that type of thing is centered around their employment. So we go to work, we're around other people, most of us, hopefully enjoy the people we work around. And that's going to be beneficial for mental health as well. So if that's suddenly gone, or if people find themselves in a situation where that's suddenly gone, then finding a way perhaps to still be connected to other people. And, there's a variety of ways, I guess, people could do that. Perhaps it's volunteering or whatever, and, even connecting with friends, regularly, and making sure that we're doing things like that will be, helping us, satisfy that need for relatedness or staying connected with other people. And so I think those are some of the types of things that self-determination theory would suggest.
Excellent. I understand that I have asked you very broad but yet also complicated questions as well when it comes to redundancy and employment. And thank you so much for sharing with us about some of the positive activities and ideas based on self-determination theories. We understand that, as you mentioned, and employment and work is central to a lot of people's life, and therefore when that is lost or shattered, obviously there's always this loss of perhaps shattering confidence in terms of self-mastery, in terms of competency, in terms of connections, and in terms of choice as well, especially if we're talking about forced redundancy. So I guess what you're sharing with us is going back to the basic. There's no one-size-fits-all strategies, but again, finding past activities that foster the sense of choice, autonomy, this sense of connections or belonging, and this source of competencies as well. So I know that for SDT, they're talking about the acronym CAR, which is competency, autonomy, and relatedness. I like to call it the 3 C's, which is the choice, the connections, and the competencies.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, they're both nice. I like them. Yeah.
Right. So one last question for you, Gavin. What is one thing that you have been doing this week to look after your own well-being?
That's a good question as well. You know, as academics, we're very busy, and sometimes our well-being does get a bit neglected until we try and force ourselves to think about it. But you know, one thing I always try and do is just go outside and you know, have a bit of time to myself. Go running. You know, particularly when the weather's nice, I try and do that. So that's what I've been trying to do. And having a newborn baby at home, it hasn't been easy to get outside. I have to find a time that'll work for the whole family, I think. And usually that's after 7 p.m.
Yeah.
After dinner, after he's gone to bed.
Yeah.
And, you know, suddenly I've got a couple of hours to myself where I can squeeze in a run.
Totally get it. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, once again, thank you for joining us today, Gavin. Really appreciate your time. And you know, if anyone wants to engage Gavin's expertise in the areas of either well-being science, motivations, performance, or even the self-determination theory, I believe that you can reach Gavin via his email, which is gavin.slemp@unimap.edu.au. Once again, it's gavin.slemp, which is SLEMP@unimap.edu.au. Thank you for watching. My name is Adimus from Strength Optimizers. We are here to help you bring out the best in you through activating your strengths. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you.